I, 32 male, am a network architect, and I own a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs that I bought entirely on my own 2 years ago. For the last year, my fiancé, 30 female, has been living with me. We had been dating for 3 years in total. When she moved in, we agreed she would cover groceries and a fraction of the utility bills, while I handled the mortgage, property taxes, and major repairs. It seemed perfectly fair at the time because I wanted to build a life with her, not act as her landlord. We were exactly a month away from hosting a massive backyard party. It was meant to be a huge dual celebration, her 30th birthday and our official engagement party. I had already dropped $5,000 on caterers, a large tent, a live band, and custom decorations. I spent weeks prepping the lawn, fixing the deck, and making sure the house was absolutely pristine. Then came Tuesday evening. We were sitting at the kitchen island, finalizing the guest list for the caterer's head count. I was typing the names into a spreadsheet on my laptop when she casually slid her phone across the granite counter. She told me I needed to add one more person to the VIP table, not even looking up from her wine glass. I looked at the screen, and it was a text confirming an RSVP. The sender at the top was X. This was the guy she dated for 5 years right before we met. Her excuse for their breakup was always a vague story about how the timing just wasn't right. I had never actually met him, but his shadow had always lingered in the periphery of our relationship. I asked her, keeping my voice as level as possible, if she seriously invited her ex-boyfriend to our engagement party. She got immediately defensive. She told me he was a big part of her history, that they had been talking recently, and that he wanted to show his support. She actually had the nerve to say it showed maturity. I told her maturity is knowing boundaries. I made it crystal clear that I was not going to host the guy she slept with for 5 years at a party celebrating our future marriage, especially not in my own home, on my dime. She rolled her eyes, crossed her arms, and called me insecure. She said she already told him he could come, she wasn't taking it back, and she refused to look ridiculous. I told her to tell him there was a miscommunication, or that the guest list was capped. I honestly didn't care what she told him, but I put my foot down and said he was not coming to this house. That is when she leaned forward, her face hardening into this mask of pure entitlement. She looked me dead in the eyes and delivered the line that ended our entire relationship right then and there. She said, "My ex is coming to our party. If you're uncomfortable, you can leave." The silence in the kitchen was just absolute. I looked at the woman I was supposed to marry. There was zero compromise in her posture, no empathy at all, just a cold calculation and a test of my spine. She fully expected me to fold. She thought I would argue, yell, and eventually give in just to keep the peace. I just said, "Understood." I closed the spreadsheet. I opened my email client. We had a master mailing list of all 80 guests, which included my family, her family, our mutual friends, and coworkers. I typed a new subject line for an update regarding the party. The body of the email was incredibly brief. I just wrote to everyone apologizing for the inconvenience, but the party scheduled for next month was completely canceled. I explained that my fiancé decided she wanted to host her ex alone, and I had decided to give them the space to do so. I hit send. I stood up, picked up my laptop, walked straight to the guest bedroom, and locked the door behind me. I didn't say another word to her. Exactly 3 minutes later, her phone started ringing. It was her mother, then her sister, then her best friend. I could hear the vibrations buzzing relentlessly against the kitchen counter, followed by her frantic, echoing footsteps running through the house. She started pounding her fists against the guest bedroom door, screaming at me, asking what I did. She demanded I open the door, claiming I humiliated her, and ordered me to send another email saying it was a joke. I didn't open the door. I just put my noise-canceling headphones on and let her scream until she literally lost her voice. By the next morning, my own phone was flooded with messages. Most of my friends were asking if I was okay, but her family was completely on the offensive. Her mother left a voicemail calling me a controlling, manipulative narcissist who was trying to isolate her daughter from her support network. When I finally emerged from the bedroom to get some coffee, fiancé was sitting on the living room sofa, just glaring at me. The entitlement had not faded overnight. It had actually mutated into rage. She demanded an apology for her family. She also demanded $5,000, saying she was keeping the caterers and the tent to host her birthday party there anyway since it was her house too. I calmly reminded her that her name was not on the deed. I also let her know that I had already called the vendors at 8 in the morning and canceled everything. I ate a $2,000 non-refundable deposit, but honestly, it was worth every single penny. There was going to be no party. Her face went completely pale. She scrambled for her phone, presumably to check our joint checking account where we kept a small pool of money for shared household expenses. She realized very quickly that I had already transferred my portion out. She started yelling that I couldn't do this, that she lived there, had tenant rights, and could invite whoever she wanted to her home. She was technically right about the tenancy, which I already knew. In my state, even without a formal written lease, a person who establishes residency is considered a month-to-month tenant by default. I couldn't just throw her bags on the lawn and change the locks. That would be an illegal self-help eviction, and it would leave me completely vulnerable to a massive civil lawsuit. But her utter desperation to host her ex in my house felt entirely disproportionate to a simple birthday party. The sheer audacity of her entitlement triggered a really deep suspicion in my gut. Why was this specific man so important that she would blow up our engagement over him? Later that day, while she was out supposedly looking for a new venue to salvage her pride, I sat at my computer. Like I said, I am a network architect. I handle data packets and security protocols for a living. I logged into my home router's administration panel. I wasn't looking to read her encrypted messages, which is illegal and pretty much impossible without her device anyway, but I could easily see the DNS logs. I could see exactly what domains her devices were connecting to and when. I noticed some unusually heavy traffic to a local legal services portal and a real estate valuation site. All of it was originating from her tablet over the last 3 weeks. I went straight into the home office. We shared a filing cabinet for important documents. I bypassed the folders holding our utility bills and went straight to the back, where she kept her personal paperwork. Tucked inside a folder labeled for wedding ideas was a printed legal document. It was a cohabitation and equity agreement. It wasn't signed yet, but it was fully drafted by a local attorney. I read through the legalese, and it was pretty shocking. The document was clearly designed to be slipped into a stack of papers, maybe the vendor contracts she'd been hounding me to sign for the wedding. It explicitly stated that in consideration of our impending marriage, I was granting her a 50% equity stake in the property upon the exact date of signing, regardless of whether the marriage actually took place or not. I flipped to the very back page. There was a sticky note attached, written in a handwriting I didn't recognize. The note told her to get me to sign it before the 15th, and once it was notarized, they would force the partition sale. It ended with, "See you at the party." X. The excuse that the timing wasn't right wasn't just a simple lie. Her ex was broke. Fiancé wasn't just casually cheating, she was running a highly calculated long con. They had actually stayed together this entire time. She used me for 3 whole years to live rent-free, save up her own money, and orchestrate a legal trap to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars in home equity. All of it was just to fund her real life with him. The realization didn't even break my heart. It just froze it completely solid. I didn't confront her when she returned home. I didn't yell or throw the paperwork in her face like they do in the movies. I just put the document exactly where I found it, took high-resolution photos of every single page with my phone, and backed them up to a secure cloud drive. The very next morning, I hired a shark of a real estate attorney. I showed him the photos of the drafted agreement and explained the whole situation. He confirmed exactly what I suspected. If I had blindly signed that document in a stack of wedding papers, I would have been fighting a brutal, uphill legal battle to keep my own home, and I likely would have lost half its value. My attorney advised me that she was a month-to-month tenant by law. He explicitly told me not to change the locks, turn off the power, or touch her belongings. He drafted a formal 30-day notice to quit. If she refused to leave after 30 days, we would file an unlawful detainer lawsuit. I hired a professional process server to hand it to her directly at her workplace the next day. I wanted it formally documented, entirely undeniable, and publicly humiliating. When she came home that evening, she was gripping the legal notice, physically shaking with fury. She slammed the front door and shrieked at me, asking if I was seriously evicting her after everything she had done for me. She called me a monster. I didn't even look up from my laptop. I just told her she had 30 days. She sneered at me and said 30 days is a long time. She promised to make my life a living hell. She proudly announced that her ex was coming over every single day until she moved out, claiming he was her guest, and I couldn't legally stop a tenant from having guests. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to bait me. She wanted an altercation. She wanted me to threaten her or her ex so she could call the police, file a fake domestic violence report, and get a temporary restraining order. If a judge granted an ex parte restraining order based on her lies, I would be legally forced to vacate my own home until the hearing, which would give her and her ex full control of the property. It's a very common, incredibly dirty trick used in highly contentious evictions. I didn't bite at all. I just said, okay. The next day, while she was at work, I took massive preemptive action. I purchased 4 discrete, high-definition security cameras. I installed them in the kitchen, the living room, the hallway, and facing the front door. In my state, installing cameras in common areas of a home you own is perfectly legal, provided they are visible and there is no reasonable expectation of privacy, like in a bathroom. Because my state is a 2-party consent state for audio recording, I went to the hardware store and bought small signs. I prominently placed them near all the entrances. They clearly read that the premises were under 24/7 audio and video surveillance. By walking through the door, they legally consented to the recording. I then spent the afternoon moving all my valuable electronics, important documents, and family heirlooms into a rented, climate-controlled storage unit. True to her threat, she brought her ex over that Friday night. He walked right into my house with this arrogant smirk on his face, carrying a 6-pack of beer and acting like he already owned the place. He even bumped his shoulder hard into mine as he walked past me in the narrow hallway. He scoffed at me and said, "Excuse me, landlord." I didn't say a word. I just pointed up at the ceiling corner. The small camera lens was staring right back at him, and the red recording light was blinking brightly. Her ex froze. Fiancé, who was walking in right behind him, stopped dead in her tracks. She finally noticed the warning signs I had put up on the door frames. She pointed at the camera, completely outraged, and demanded to know what it was. She yelled that I couldn't record her. I replied calmly that they were common areas. It was fully legal, and the signs constituted notice and consent. I told them to smile for the cloud. They immediately retreated to the guest bedroom and slammed the door. I sat comfortably in my living room, watching the live camera feeds on my phone. About an hour later, I saw them emerge into the kitchen. Her ex was pacing back and forth, looking really agitated, while fiancé was whispering furiously. They clearly didn't realize how sensitive the built-in microphones were. I heard her hiss to him that they could still do it. She told him to just bump a table or break a vase. She said she would call 911, claim I got violent and threw it at her, and bragged that the cops always side with the woman. Her ex looked nervous. He pointed out that I had cameras and the police would see them fake it. She reasoned, completely blinded by her own staggering entitlement, that they just needed to break the cameras first. I watched live on the screen as her ex grabbed a heavy wooden broom from the pantry. He reached up and violently smashed the kitchen camera. The feed on my phone immediately went to static. I didn't hesitate for a single second. I pulled up the saved video file on my phone that captured their entire conversation, their malicious plotting, and him destroying my property. I dialed 911 right then and there. I gave the dispatcher my name and address. I stated very clearly that I had a trespasser in my home who had just actively destroyed my security equipment. I added that I had crystal clear audio and video of him and my former fiancé actively conspiring to file a false domestic violence report against me, and I needed officers there immediately. The police arrived in under 7 minutes. Fiancé tried to put on the waterworks the second they knocked. She ran to the door with this completely fabricated, tearful story about me being mentally unstable and threatening their lives. The officers listened to her very patiently. Then I stepped outside onto the porch. I handed the lead officer my phone and played the video. They watched the clear footage and listened to the crisp audio of their entire plot, followed by her ex committing actual vandalism. The officer's demeanor shifted instantly. He looked right past her, pointed at her ex, and told him to step outside immediately. Her ex was placed in handcuffs on my front lawn for malicious destruction of property. Because he had committed an actual crime on the premises, his legal status as her guest was entirely invalidated. I officially trespassed him with the officers as witnesses. The police informed him bluntly that if he ever stepped 1 foot on my property again, he would be arrested for criminal trespassing on the spot. Fiancé was absolutely hysterical. She was screaming at the police, telling them they were taking the wrong person and that I was the abuser. The officer turned to her and warned her to be thankful they weren't hauling her in for conspiracy to file a false police report. He reminded her she had 30 days to vacate the premises, but he highly suggested she leave that very night. As her ex was being shoved into the back of the police cruiser, I pulled out a stack of manila envelopes I had prepared earlier. I had spent the afternoon printing out physical screenshots of the cohabitation agreement, the sticky note from her ex, and a typed timeline of their entire scam. Her mother, best friend, and sister had all driven over in a panic because fiancé had frantically texted them that the police were at the house. They pulled up to the curb just as the cruiser was driving away with her boyfriend in the back. They ran up my driveway, yelling and demanding to know what I had done to her. I didn't argue. I just wordlessly handed one envelope to her mother, one to her sister, and one to her best friend. I told them to read it. I said she wasn't planning a wedding, she was planning a heist. I stood there and watched as her mother pulled out the papers. I watched her eyes scan the legal document and the sticky note. I watched the horrible realization dawn on her face, all the color completely draining from her cheeks. The furious, self-righteous woman who had left me blistering voicemails just days prior suddenly looked very small and incredibly embarrassed. She looked up at her daughter, who was standing on the porch, trembling, finally realizing her entire facade had collapsed in front of everyone she cared about. Her mother looked at her, her voice completely devoid of any warmth, and told her to pack her things. She said she was coming home with her right now. Fiancé didn't even try to argue. Her insane entitlement completely evaporated the exact moment her audience saw the undeniable truth. She broke her own tenancy that night. She packed 2 large suitcases in silence and left in the back of her mother's car. She never even came back for the rest of her things. She had her brother rent a truck to come get them 2 weeks later. I obviously never had that party. Instead, I enjoyed a really quiet, peaceful weekend in the home I worked so hard to buy, fully secure in the knowledge that I kept exactly what was mine. Sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't loud, violent, or explosive. Sometimes, it's just stepping back, setting the stage, and letting entitled people dig their own graves while you record it with undeniable proof. If you enjoyed seeing a master manipulator get legally outplayed in crisp 4K resolution, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and definitely won't cost you half your home equity.